Hello and welcome to the Dank Christian Memes podcast. Dank Christian Memes is a place for all kinds of Christians and all kinds of non-Christians to enjoy some silly memes, and also this podcast. Today we're going to be talking about divine cinema with our honored guest of honor, Castor Troy. You want to say hi, Troy?
Well, hello, and I'm an honored guest of honor. I like that double addition there. Makes me
Honored
feel
on both sides. It's like quotation marks. Yeah. So, do you want to talk about how we're gonna approach this today? We're going to be talking about religion and God in cinema. We're going to try to handle some different time periods. Do we want to put any rails on this thing, or do we just want to let it loose and just to see where we end up on this?
I kind of want to just let it loose and see where it ends up. Mostly because when you asked, "Hey, what should we talk about for the Q&A and like kind of the more structured conversation?" I was just thinking of, I think you and I both spoken about just seeing Thor, Love and Thunder, and I'm thoroughly enjoying how even in more popular, super duper mainstream media right now, they can finally start to reference more religions and deities and that sort of thing, and just kind of have it be like casual conversation or casually thrown in, and almost farcical. Whereas not long ago, that is something that wouldn't have been possible, but you can still see some of the rules that they adhere to. So I just kind of want to keep it loose and just see where we go.
Cool. Yeah, and I definitely want to get to Thor, Love and Thunder later, and we'll have to figure out how we're going to handle the spoiler scenario, because it is a relatively new movie. How long? 2-3 months has it been out?
It's a few months. It's weird to operate under the spoiler rules, specifically with like MCU and Disney properties, because it's like you still want to be respectful of people that might not have seen it, but so many people see it immediately. It's really hard to gauge who those people still are sometimes. So yeah, we'll try to be spoiler mindful.
Mindful, that's good. Yes. So Castor Troy is our currently our resident media critic. We'll see how long we can get you to stick around, but 2 for 1. So generous of you. Jacob, do you want to introduce yourself? Jacob is our resident archaeologist.
Yeah, I'm. My name is Jacob. I'm the local, as Broclen stated, the local archaeologist and general ancient history buff, who is a regular here. So, hello everyone.
Thanks for joining us on this adventure. And with us again is Nuntribe. You want to introduce yourself a little bit, Nuntribe?
Oh, hi, everybody. Sorry. On the road, probably shouldn't be talking, but I'll be not on the road. I'll not be on the road in a moment. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. And I'm always happy to be a regular. And yeah, can't wait to get started.
Great. Thank you for being here. All right. So I'm going to kick it off. So I'm going to confess this, and this is all review for Castor Troy, who knows me pretty well. I'm not a movie buff. I don't think I enjoy my parts of pop culture, but I would not qualify as a pop culture critic. So you will probably see me sort of bowing to Castor Troy a little bit here, because I just don't have a lot of expertise. But the first place I want to start is way back in the past. There's no spoiler warning on this one, because it's 1946. It's a Wonderful Life. It's black and white. The lead is Jimmy Stewart. It's an interesting little movie. Apparently, when it first came out, it was not very popular, but they ended up running it on TV years later, and it got popular that way. It does a few weird things, including having what is clearly a man in his 30s or 40s acting as a high schooler, and we're supposed to act like that's normal. So that's been going on for a while, apparently. But there's definite, I would go as far to say there's a bit of a depiction of God, and it's almost like the depiction of God we see in Futurama, where it's basically like a talking galaxy. And he talks to one of his angels, which is a little star. And a big part of the movie is this guardian angel named Clarence trying to get the main protagonist out of a suicidal, he's thinking about jumping off a bridge. So God basically sends this angel down, and before he can jump off the bridge, the angel jumps off the bridge, So the guy jumps off to save him, which I don't know if that's what, he still jumped, but I guess he jumped for all the right reasons. Anyway, the whole point of it is supposed to be that he sees the value of his life, which is why the title is called It's a Wonderful Life. And the final quote, which you've probably heard and has probably been riffed on many times, where his daughter says, "Every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings." And that's referring to the character Clarence having done his job properly. But outside the context of this movie, I've never heard anything about that, about angels and bells and wings. Jacob, do we have any historical bells giving wings to angels anywhere, or did this movie just make this up out of whole cloth?
I have never heard anything of the sort, nor have I actually seen the movie. So this is a new concept to me, other than the saying just kind of existing out there in the ether.
I will say it's a weird little movie for the day, not just because it's black and white, but just because there's a lot of norms. So when a man and woman are in a conflict, the guy shakes the woman for some reason. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about older movie tropes, Troy.
I can't. So It's a Wonderful Life. I'm glad you touched on the history of it not being a huge hit when it came out, but definitely getting legs after it was. I can't remember what production company bought the rights to it, but they basically just ran it all the time, specifically around Christmas. It became a Christmas movie because it was something cheap to put on. Ironically, they put it on thinking no one would watch it. They were like, all right, we'll just have something on to compete with a parade or something like that. And it just became this kind of stalwart thing that people went back to. I will say it is filled with a lot of that era Americana, and very much we want to depict an idyllic version of what we think growing up in a society is, in a suburban community type thing. And it has its thrills and its villains, but it's very much it's like Pleasantville, but it's unironic. It is very much this is how great life is. This man shouldn't be sad, even though the banker owns the town and is holding everything hostage and his boss is being all that stuff. But part of that Americana and part of baking into old cinema tropes is an acceptance of a higher power in some way. And that's even the whole crux of the movie is him sort of praying and pleading to an unanswering God, like you said, similar to Futurama, where God's like, dude, I'm just here. I'm hands off. I'm not really doing anything, but I'm doing everything. And part of that is sending good old Clarence down and show him how to live. But it's so much of still steeped in the misogyny and the patriarchy stuff that people are speaking up a lot today. But you see it in a movie like that. As wholesome as It's a Wonderful Life is, he's still shaking women, and there's still very much the men are in charge kind of thing. And even the women that are technically in charge are kind of depicted as shrill and being mean and evil. And all that's wrapped up in a nice bow of but if you're a good person, God rewards you. Maybe. So there's a lot going on under the fabric. Of
and sort of the story we're sold about George Bailey is that he is quite the Boy Scout. So, that there's a little bit of a prosperity gospel angle to it, even though I would say there's a lot about it, with Mr. Popper and the building and loan stuff that's actually sort of anti-capitalist. But it does push this up. Well, if you work hard and follow good Christian values, eventually your community will come together and give you a bunch of money, which back in 1942, I guess that could get a person out of a situation. I feel like our holes get a little deeper nowadays.
Yeah, it could get you. They thought it could get you out of jam. The thing is, the evil banker still is there. They don't really solve that issue. They just throw some money at it and say, all right, maybe you're not the one in trouble anymore. But
no, it's a personal story. We don't solve the systemic issues. We don't really engage with them more than they engage with us.
And also, to kind of go back a bit, I also have never heard that phrase about the angel getting its wings when a bell rings outside of this movie. And I'm willing to believe that this movie kind of might have made that up and people kind of just ran with it.
I think you're right. And I think people who sell angels and bells around holidays are like, oh, that's good. That's good. The marketing angle.
It's so even if you jump from, because it's a good jumping off point of It's a Wonderful Life, then it's funny you said, oh, I'm thinking as far back in popular culture, let's go with It's a Wonderful Life. I hadn't realized that predated the 10 Commandments, because that was a popular movie that came out almost exactly 10 years later. And it's very much a no, let's, like, if you were to take It's a Wonderful Life as almost a Job kind of parable, where it's like, hey, you're being tested, but if you stay the right course and continue being a good person, God will reward you with normalcy. Like
to be clear, Job never gets an easy off. So definitely a happier ending than Job has.
It definitely gives a happier ending, but it's very similar to, it's like, hey, you're just going to keep being tested, and you're going to keep being tried, and you're going to figure it out, and then you get some sort of reward at the end. But it's very fairy tale, kind of almost fairy tale, but grounded in a weird way, where it's like it's still your real life, but you're bouncing in between times and looking back on things. Whereas the Ten Commandments is a fantasy epic. You get superpowers, you get visions, you get like all the whole shebang, and it's like, look at the awe and splendor of God and Christianity, and look at the origin stories of all these things. And I love putting those two side by side. It's like, can the world accept this? All right, we're putting this on screen. And then you get a lot of things like that. They might not directly address a Christian God, but it very much is like, we're going to play up the epic of what religion can be on screen.
Well, and I'm just going to point out, as a Protestant myself, that there's many denominations that have issues with anti-Semitism and sort of anti-Semitism being a component of their theology almost. But then when we see some great Old Testament stories with, who was Charlton Heston? Was he the lead?
Yes, he was.
Yes. I ate that up. Yeah, so we're cool with the Hebrew Bible on our standards. But yeah, that's always been a bit of a conflict. We have that issue on Dank Christian memes, honestly, where plenty of our memes could be categorized as Hebrew memes. So, to what extent do we share them?
And just as, for lack of a better term, as an outsider, I've always wondered about how that relationship works, because there is so much crossover. And it's like, yeah, you see where the different theologies kind of splinter, but also where there's just a lot of shared either stories or information. It's like, yeah, how does a community like this kind of process that? But that's a conversation for a different day.
Well, and we have our friends over at Dank that, I imagine if we get out of line, they would tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, yo, what? But, there's kind of like an acceptance that cultural appropriation is more than 50% of the Bible. So, I think we have to at least accept that on a level.
Just a wee bit. Good.
Was Charleston, was the Ten Commandments one of the first, like, sort of epic movies done in color? And to what extent do you think color makes a difference to, like, is that an important transition, or is it just a distraction?
I would say most epics by that time were done in color, just because it added, like, that was part of the sell. This is a Technicolor, this is live and Panavision and all. Like, they wanted to showcase why you needed to come out to the theater and see something like that, as opposed to watching it elsewhere. Watching at home wasn't really an option, but obviously TV was already invented, but like watching something like that at home really was an option. You had to watch it in a theater, and that was the big build for anything like that. So it wasn't, I want to say it wasn't, I can't tell if it was the first, but it's probably like in that first wave where they start to really like exploit and utilize that as a selling point. Like, hey, it's in color and it's big, and it's your TV can't handle this. And also another way to wrap that up is through the lens of religion or Christianity, and to say like, hey, and it's about the Bible, so you can bring the whole family. Like, it was the 4-quadrant movie before that was a term.
Now, there was also Judah Ben-Hur, which for the most part, I would say isn't really a Christian film, but Jesus Christ does have a walk-on cameo. Has anyone else seen Ben-Hur?
Yeah.
So I watched it a couple times in Latin class, so my memory on it isn't great. But my recollection is it's the story of a dude who I think spends a fair amount of time as a slave / gladiator, sort of a pseudo Spartacus character. And at one point he's dying in the desert, and Jesus is like, yo, here's some water. All right, I got things to do. See you later.
Yeah, he pretty much tags in for like assist.
And The Simpsons does such a great riff on this when it's, instead of Jesus, Mr. Burns giving him water and he gets booed in the theater.
But yeah, Ben-Hur is very much, for quick connection. It's basically the gladiator, the Russell Crowe gladiator of its day. Very similar in like, yeah, you're a slave, you're in the Roman Coliseum, that sort of thing. Big epic battles, the chariot race, which everybody like can probably think of even if they haven't seen the movie. Yeah, it's one of those movies that's
the chariot race is big, and it's been riffed on a lot. I'm going to put something out there because I can only take 3 steps without stepping on Star Wars at some point. I think the chariot race in Ben-Hur is the reason why we had the pod race in Episode 1. That George Lucas wanted to take his own swing at a space sci-fi version of that chariot race. What do you think?
I would 100% agree with that. George Lucas, you could probably research and find a direct quote of him saying, like, yeah, like, I love the chariot race in Ben-Hur. I wanted to try and replicate that in some way. All of Star Wars, at least the original movie, in less in motif, but actually literally in execution, is just an amalgam of all the things that Lucas loved growing up. It's a samurai movie. It's a Western. It's a sci-fi epic. Like, it's all these things and all these themes and like just kind of woven into a tapestry thrown on top of each other. And what got spit out was Star Wars. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Ben-Hur specifically, that chariot race was like a huge inspiration that he couldn't pull off originally. But once he had the technology, he said, oh, let me do it now. I'll figure it out now. Let me do it.
So I want to give anyone, if you want to bring up a movie or mention a depiction of God or religion in media, feel free to raise your hand. You can also post a comment in comments, and I am duty bound to pay attention to those comments or I will be rightfully chastised. But yeah, feel free to speak up. I don't want to, dominate the conversation too much.
I want to say something really quick. It would almost seem like a pun earlier when you said, you asked about the impact of color on, on, 10 Commandments. And it's like,
accidental pun.
There is a big color thing in that whole situation, right? You have all these white actors portraying these Middle Eastern
everybody
people. So
pretty
that was
pale.
all, I was waiting for I was waiting for Castor to jump on that, man.
I was too focused on giving an actual answer that I didn't miss it, but like, yeah, no, you were 100% right. I was like, wait, there's a whole bunch of white people in that movie too.
Okay, so let's pivot on this point. And this is something I'd love to get your input on, Jacob, too, is what is an appropriate skin tone for Egyptians? And I know that casting, especially during certain time periods, was a really heavy question. But I've seen this debated as, well, what was certain skin tones at certain times? I don't know if that's necessarily the way, the most valuable way to come across it. But I do know that, like, I've seen Egyptians played by all sorts of folks, and I have no idea, what might even be accurate.
So, like, ancient Egypt in general was actually a pretty, like, ethnically diverse place. And we see that in art and in the archaeological record. So you can reasonably get away with a lot. Most ancient Egyptians probably look pretty similar to modern Egyptians.
So what about Ramses in the 10 Commandments? This is definitely a white dude playing this role, right?
Yeah, he's definitely a little bit very miscast there in skin tone. It's not that we can really say that ancient Egyptians looked one way, because we see in their art there were Nubians from sub-Saharan Africa, there were West Semitic people from the Levant, there were Greeks at times, but like, definitely there is a historical trend in movies of portraying Egyptians and other ancient Near Eastern people as a lot whiter than they would have been.
Would it be fair to say that Egypt was somewhat diversified because of its relationship with the Mediterranean as well as its relationship with the African continent?
Yeah, the Nile Valley is basically like the one highway in between the deserts that you can move between the Mediterranean world and like Nubia and Ethiopia and all that. And so as a result, has a long history of being the major route between these two places. And you can see that in art when they depict all the various peoples of the realm and stuff.
All right. So I wanted to cover that. And this is definitely an issue that comes up on Dank Christian memes. And I've seen it come up on regular meme subs too, is, what ideas and attitudes do we have about the skin tone of certain folks versus what media shows them to be? And I know one of the biggest, I think one of the most popular maybe memes on the subject is there were no white people in the Bible. Think on that as long as you need to. So again, sounds accurate to me, but I am certainly no expert.
I mean,
there were certainly Italian
empires.
Right? Some Italian folks, right?
Yeah. And
Spanish,
Greeks.
some people from Spain, maybe some Greeks. Yeah, they were, I guess.
Well, and in school they teach us that the Mediterranean and the Silk Road, that there was so much trade. I'm like, was there sexy trade too? I assume that there was. So yeah, perhaps we oversimplify the subject when we when we're looking at it in cinema context.
Like, none of these racial categories actually existed in people's minds back then. They don't comment on them in the same way. They had a concept of like lighter and darker skin, but the race categories we use today are modern cultural developments. Like, these ancient authors are not categorizing people these ways.
I'm glad you brought that up, because if we're still kind of speaking on Charlton Heston era, like 50s era movie depictions, especially of that era, that region, and then within religion, you could also see the coding and how much they darkened up certain characters to play certain characters. So it's like, oh, we know that no one really white was in this region, so we have to give like some olive color, some tanning to everybody. But how much do we want to tan our heroes versus how much are we going to color up our villains? And all right, we're going to let the villains look a little bit darker. Like, there's always that that beneath then where they're like, it's movie shorthand, and they're allowing racism to be the shorthand. It's like, the dark people are the bad guys. You know that much.
With like Aladdin more recently.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. Or even Lion King, Scar.
Yep. Gave that man jet black hair. Like, just to let you know, even though he was voiced by Jeremy Irons and Mufasa was voiced by James Earl Jones, the blackest voice in all the cosmos, they needed to differentiate by color there.
Well, and I also want to mention, for better or for worse or for whatever, there's sort of some general cultural appropriation that happens around at least Christianity, like Asian Jesus, who frequently has some sort of 6-pack or 8-pack, is very popular in the memes, and there's many more. I think one of the things we've also had folks that just collect as many Jesus images as they can and jam them into one meme, which is a fun practice.
Well, now that that's been introduced, one big thing that was on my mind when you asked about like what topics and kind of we started going down this route, I was thinking specifically a lot of specifically Christ imagery in heroic movies. And two of my favorite examples. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I know that in my circles, one of my first sermons was on the subject of whether or not Spider-Man in the first Spider-Man movie should be seen as a Christ-like figure. And I think I concluded that Christians at the time were just really hungry for a Christ-like figure. So they were seeing one wherever they wanted to.
I wouldn't say in the first movie, definitely in the second movie. I mean,
he gets a little crucified by a train in the second movie. That's hard to deny.
Exactly. So you have that, and then carried by the people and that sort of thing. Like, that's very much explicit, overt Christ-like imagery. I think. But
did the director steer into it more than is there a bit of a social back and forth at this point?
I don't know if there is so much a social back and forth at that point. I think he was trying to. What's the quickest shorthand that you can use to show sacrifice for the greater good? Oh, the crucifixion. So if you can throw that in there in your movie, in your superhero movie, to show like, hey, this is the ultimate good guy doing the ultimate good guy act. He's sacrificing himself for you. Like, that's a good shorthand there. Because another blatant example of it, almost the exact same pose, is when Superman is trying to resurrect himself in Superman Returns after being shaked with the kryptonite shiv. Goes up, hits the Christ pose in front of the sun, gets his powers back. So he's already done the sacrifice. He's going through the resurrection. Now he's back to like help beat up Lex Luthor.
Descended to hell, rose to heaven. Yeah, it's all right there. I remember the scene. I didn't care for the movie, probably because I think he was so Jesus-y. I couldn't believe he was under any truth.
I do find it. I've always find it ironically hilarious that is a very obvious and overt Christ-like depiction of Superman, a character that is famously created by two Jewish men as a response to the Depression.
Well, and that's, perhaps a subject for another time, because weren't a lot of, I know, was it Jack Kirby, the creator of Captain America? I'm sure there's many Christians that would want to claim that icon, but he was definitely a Jewish author.
Jack Kirby
really expressing his feelings about Nazis, by the way. Some of those early comics are really interesting.
Which also makes the depiction, how people try to talk about those things in current text, hilarious. Like, just Jack Kirby, it's not even subtext. It was the text. It's like Captain America beat up Nazis. He beat up the evil people that were killing the Jews. But yeah, that, again, another subject for another day.
None Tribe, do you have a movie or an instance of God or religion in media you think we should focus on? Or are you driving still and I should leave you alone?
I'm not driving right now.
Okay.
I'm good. Thank you for checking on my well-being and safety. I appreciate that. I don't have one off the top of my head. When you asked that question, I started thinking. So let me think a little bit.
All right. Well, I'm going to veer while still in the neighborhood of our last question. One of the things that's been great for me is the Rugrats depictions of the Exodus, as well as the Passover and a few other things. I enjoy it. That's a nice nostalgia trip for me. And it's a great way to introduce these stories to my daughter. And I think they're pretty well done. I'm interested to know, anyone else's opinion on it. I think they do a very good job of sidestepping. Instead of all the firstborns being killed, they were all taken away. But that's good. That's pretty clever. So
I'll say, you say it's a good way to introduce those things to your daughter. I would say it's a great way to introduce it just to people in general who might not have experience or knowledge of Hanukkah and the Jewish people and the Jewish faith. I know, and I'm speaking as a man from the Northeast, and Broclen, you can kind of speak to this too. We had a large Jewish population around where we grew up. So there was, even through osmosis, you kind of pick some of that stuff up. I mean, I got Hanukkah.
I had Jewish folks at both my seminary schools. Yes, we have a very healthy Jewish population up here. And I mentioned before that a fair amount of Christianity, going by the Bible, more than half, is cultural appropriation. So when I think, I'm not saying that we can't still use that half of the Bible, but what I am saying is you got to give credit. You got to give a footnote, maybe a little nod of respect when you do stuff like that, which is often.
You got to give them their proper credit. But further to the point, I was thinking so episodes like that within Rugrats, it's for kids. It's a cartoon, so obviously more children are likely going to be watching it. But how many parents were watching it that were like, oh, I didn't really know this version of the story. Even if you want to call it a sanitized, safe for kids version, that gives them enough base groundwork to probably correct a lot of the things that they either were misinterpreting or just straight up didn't know. I love when subjects like that are thrown into children's programming. And I hear people use oh, they're indoctrinating or they're pushing the agenda. Or they're just giving people information. And that's what those episodes are.
Here's something interesting, and I didn't realize this until I saw a few subtle nods in the animation. There is some crossover between the Rugrats writers and producers and the writers and producers of the early Simpsons seasons. And when you look at the Rugrats grandpa telling stories, from the Hebrew Bible versus, Homer falls asleep in church and dreams that he's King Solomon, that it's a very similar vibe. Obviously, with very different audiences.
I have a thought, and I don't want to take from this. But so, is there anything else within the realm of the Rugrats children programming thing you want to hit on? Because you talking about Homer and his religion, that is a huge depiction of God and religion in movies or just in pop culture in general that we can jump off of.
I'm good. Let's veer off road, unless someone else wants to chime in.
No, I have another movie, but we'll wait till Castor gets out his stuff.
Thank you. So, two things. One, Homer Simpson, or the Simpson general, has a very, I don't want to say conflicted, but you see they have an almost adversarial relationship with religion. One, kind of the proxy is his neighbor Flanders, he doesn't like for a lot of reasons, but specifically because early on they very much depicted Flanders as a Bible thumping, super religious, annoying person, quote unquote. But then there's also those early episodes where Homer straight up meets God. Not like a depiction of God. They drop a lot of subtle hints that Homer is actively speaking to a real God. And I've always found that interesting because they just lob that out there and just move on. Yep, God exists in the Simpsons universe. He is a real being. He is there. He's not a figment of anybody's imagination. It's not like we're not playing folksy with it. No, God exists. He's real for them. And he will straight up talk to certain characters as need be. And I've always found that super fascinating because and again, this is dating me and recognizing how much of an old I am, but The Simpsons was kind of super counterculture at the time. It was very much it's popular, but parents weren't allowing their kids to watch it. It was on all sorts of lists.
Which made it more popular.
Exactly. But also they have just very, I don't say subdued, but just kind of low-key depiction of God and religion that was on the show that people were heralding as the worst thing to happen. But it's also no, but you're also getting this other side of things. And I always found that super fascinating. Broclen, you ever notice anything like that in your Simpsons viewing? Because I know you are quite the fan as well.
I am, yeah. I was talking about The Simpsons as language. I think so. One thing about Matt Groening is I believe he is a Unitarian Universalist. But I think he was also, raised on a more Christian side. Some Unitarians are essentially Christians, and some would say they are not that. So he brings a really interesting perspective, and I think you see some of that in Futurama as well. I wanted to point to, Homer's relationship with religion. You pointed to his relationship with God, which especially in, I think, Homer the Heretic might be the title of it. When he decides to stop going to church.
Yeah.
And it turns out that his fire department is also staffed by people from the church. So I think that they try very hard to make the case to him, but I think it's God who makes the case to him in the end. But even, before and after, because there isn't, especially in early seasons of Simpsons, continuity is, everything goes back to normal at the end of the episode. Homer doesn't, like church. The kids don't like church. There's an episode where the cat, they're playing cowboys and Indians, and the parents round up both sides to drag them to church. So it's really Marge that is the push for the family to go on the regular, and I think that rings true for a lot of suburban families at the time, that there's that one person really pushing people uphill to get them to go to church because, I'm going to get these people saved any when I can. And that's, that episode is about Homer saying, yeah, I'm not doing that, Marge. Enjoy taking the kids to church alone.
Homer going full suburban dad. He's like, you know what? I've decided that's mom work and I'm going to leave that to you. And it's it's interesting. I also think, from that perspective, is interesting, going back a little bit, that you said is members of the church that made up the volunteer fire department. But they also make a good point to populate the volunteer fire department with characters that Homer is friends with, or people that he sees as
Apu is there too. Yeah, people that are a part of his day to day.
Yeah. And it's kind of making that point, hey, even for lack of a better term, your normal friends go to church too. And it's and that's what I've always enjoyed, how The Simpsons and Futurama, I'm glad you brought that up, would do that. And while certain characters might have adversarial or negative thoughts about religion, the show overall just kind of approached it with very much no, it's just a thing that's a part of people's lives, and you either can accept it, for lack of a better term, in good faith or in bad faith. And I've always just liked how that was depicted on those shows, because on the flip side, it's almost like movies don't do that. They do very much of, this movie is going to be about how good religion is or how bad religion is. And you usually see that in horror movies. Religion is very much used in horror movies as the harbinger of evil. And even in the movies like The Exorcist, where they give two sides, hey, there's a good religion and bad side to religion. The bad side seems really freaking powerful and prominent up until good overcomes.
Yeah, and I wonder if Matt Groening was aware of that, because in both instances, The Simpsons, he takes really his most, I'm going to try to be kind because I shouldn't be judgmental and say unrefined character. It's Homer that has a dialogue with God. It's Bender who has a dialogue with God. That he's taking, what you might consider the least godly characters and putting them in dialogue with the divine. And I see that as a great reminder that, no one has a monopoly on divinity. But, I'm sure not everyone sees that. I may be thinking about this a little more than others.
No, I'm trying to put on my my most encyclopedic photographic memory hat and digging through the crates. In both shows, it's very much the pious characters, the people you would think that were the most devout, they do not have a direct line to any of the people that they worship.
Except when Flanders is bowling. There's one time where he just barely misses strikes and he looks up and says, God, it's me.
And he just knocks it over.
Oakley. Yeah.
Yeah. He has a bunch of little moments, but it's interesting you brought up Flanders in that sense, because the direct contrast is when Flanders' house gets destroyed, right? It's the whole Job episode with Flanders.
Yeah,
so
Hurricane
it's interesting the contrast between those two situations and those characters.
Also, I just want to point out before we move on, it's a tiny little aside that Matt Groening did to show almost like to show that he is the God of the show, but also that God is slightly different than the humans. All the characters in The Simpsons have 4 fingers. God, when they depict him, always has 5. Just pointing that out. It's a little detail that a lot of people miss.
Oh man, that's mic drop.
So I just wanted to point out that we've kind of come full circle here, because I mentioned at the end of It's Wonderful Life, and it's not spoilers because it was 1946. The whole town and everyone he knows kind of rallies together and raises money, and because it's 1946, we presume that the money they raised solves most of his problems and happily ever after. Where in The Simpsons, when Ned's house is taken down by a hurricane, the town tries to rebuild him a home. But I think it has many faults, not the least of which is that it falls down shortly after he enters it, I think.
What's interesting is in a sense, it's actually a more accurate telling of Job, because he goes off on the townsfolk, which is what Job did as well with his friend. He kind of went off on his friends.
Yep, and then he very politely checks himself into a mental institution, although he does select to be taken kicking and screaming.
So the movies I was thinking of were the Almighty movies, the Bruce Almighty and the Evan Almighty. Those were the ones that popped in my head as we were thinking about sort of God.
I forgot about Bruce Almighty.
And the other
Evan Almighty was one of my favorite movies back in the day.
I love both of those movies, which I think is interesting because I just love both of those movies. They're very cheesy and corny, very funny. They hit on that question, especially Bruce Almighty, of what if I was God for a while and I had the ability to do all these things or whatever, but also don't come across particularly religious either, even though they follow sort of Christian religious tropes, I guess you could say. And then the other thing I'm going to throw out there, and we certainly don't have to go down this track, but just sort of thinking about like the whole Medea universe and kind of how God is in the background of all those movies that are built off of the gospel plays and so on and so forth. So we certainly don't have to go there if it's not as interesting, but certainly those first two I thought were interesting.
Oh, I find those to be incredibly interesting. Specifically, we can go back to the Bruce and Evan Almighty of it all, because the point you made about how, yes, they are talking about God and specifically Christianity, but they are not particularly religious. It is very much in Broclen. You can speak to this more because this is your legit area of expertise. But when you watch those movies, it's like, hey, we're going to talk about God in very much the way that we just think all people understand it. Like, oh, it's just a being you pray to, they take care of you, or they don't.
They're not getting theological. They're drawing on pre-existing consensuses. God would be well-dressed. God would hang out in an all-white office. God would be genuinely friendly and have a voice like Morgan Freeman. Yes, Morgan Freeman would be God. Oh, yeah, we can all roll with that. They did a very good job of seizing on pre-existing consensus instead of presenting a theology, which being denominational in any way has never really worked out in TV or media. I don't think we see, other than, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, I don't think we break down into denominations very frequently. That's where the trouble lies.
And before we get to Evan Almighty, the next point I was going to make is because you texted me, you were asking about other types of religious movies, and I was thinking about all those like faith-based movies that hit theaters that don't get a lot of mainstream in terms of marketing, but they make boatloads of money because they are specifically speaking about theology, and they're speaking about the power.
Are you talking about Christian cinema, for lack of a better term?
Yes, like those movies that Kirk Cameron and that like all those movies make bank, even if like the populace at large doesn't see them, because church groups are going all to them because they're speaking directly.
Well, and it's certain. I didn't know anything about them. I grew up in the church, and I was completely ignorant of this stuff because I don't think it really appealed to where I came from, sort of theologically. But apparently, in the Midwest, which is geographically most of the country, a lot of Christians are really eating this stuff up. And in the process, what I've been seeing is, a lot of critique of the stuff itself, that it doesn't really resonate outside of the audience for whom it serves. But also that it's, what's the word? It also isn't deeply theological. It's, even that media, I think, is still trying to pull on pre-existing consensuses, rather than trying to chart a theological course. But there's a lot of bias against atheists. I think there's a lot of atheist stereotyping, and I think a lot of people are convinced that they can convert atheists. And statistically speaking, that doesn't happen very often at all.
It's funny this comes up because earlier this year, my roommates and I decided that we would binge watch all 4 God's Not Dead movies and take notes on them.
Oh no! What did you do?
Dear Lord. Okay.
So I have a lot of thoughts on them specifically. What's interesting is, so I did some researching into them because the 4 movies, even though they all have one sort of spirit that runs through them, which is show that God is relevant in modern society. It manifests incredibly differently because apparently they had several different writers. The third one takes a very different tone because the first one, which is the one that everyone has seen and then decided, I'm never watching another one again because it's so ridiculous.
If you're not part of that community, it's not for a lot of people. Yeah,
that's the one where it's the kid who debates his atheist professor, and it's completely nonsensical. He doesn't really show anything until the professor dies, and immediately he believed in God all along.
I just want to tell people, like I said, that statistically it's not atheists, especially people who were born as atheists, that are converting to Christianity. But people who on surveys would say that they are, quote, nothing in particular, they are the ones that might be open to it. I don't know that anyone will ever hear me, but I'm trying to get people to leave atheists alone. They're not going to convert you to your religion. They've thought it through.
So that's the first one. The second one is a defense of homeschooling. Or rather, it's a defense of... No, the fourth one is a defense of homeschooling. The second one is it's this idea that God is being censored in schools. Someone mentions Jesus in class, and immediately there's this shadowy government-type people who are trying to sue whatever is going on.
So this is a little more political then.
It is. They get more political. The third one is, I think, the only one that actually has a message that means something, which is basically there's this church that burns down in a neighborhood on a university, and the university doesn't want to repair it, and the community has to basically face that Christian behavior in the community is not as good as it needs to be to get the approval they're seeing because the community has bad experiences, which I think is an interesting, genuine message. But that one was specifically the one that did terrible with the target audience and better with critics.
Oh no!
So you know that the like person who created that one derailed something, and then the fourth one is just straight up like Christian nationalist propaganda. I won't get too deep into it, but it's basically like America good, homeschool your kids. They're getting propagandized in school. It basically all takes place in
I work in schools. Teachers do not have time to propagandize anything. All right.
It has a weird slavery apologia moment too, but it's
Oh, I think I heard about that. Oh,
yeah.
jeez.
That they put the Thomas Jefferson wasn't that bad in the mouth of the one black character.
Oh.
Which is why I have, that's a good moment for me to say this. I sort of chafe at Christian nationalism as a thought process, and not as a thought process, as a phrase, because when we, and I'm not picking on white people, but when we sort of take the white out of that phrase, then it's almost like we neuter every Christian who does not agree with any of those things, right? Because the actual thought process behind Christian nationalism is white supremacy. So I'm very defensive of that, so to speak. I'm like, no, that's called white supremacy. I don't care what you call it or what banner you want to put over it, but that's called white supremacy.
I think, and you're absolutely correct. I think for someone like me, the idea that Christianity should be a supreme and ruling thing goes back to when it was part of the Roman Empire, when Constantine kind of brought it in. So while like I agree with you, especially in America, that really removing the word white from that is really kind of a misrepresentation in many ways, that there's also a kind of Christian nationalism that existed even before then, and it is why people insist that you'll notice that not everyone is so loud and proud about, well, every country should run according to my religion. We've been doing that since, I don't know, I'm going to say 400 AD, and Jacob could probably put a better number on it.
Constantinople was founded in 330. So sometime shortly after then would be Nicaea, and then Theodosius II would be the first would be in the following decades, but I don't know the exact year offhand.
But it was a union of, a Christian tradition, whatever it had been up until that point, and a slaveholding empire. So like that's also an important point of connection. But yeah, in America, when you replace the white from it, it's not a coincidence.
Yeah, something tells me Martin Luther King wouldn't be invited to the Lauren Boebert, meetings, is my point.
I mean, if he were willing to speak their lines, I'm sure they'd love to have him, but I don't think that's how Martin would have played it.
So and talking about the God's Not Dead movies, which can be, I would say, on the more extremist end of those faith-based cinema, there's also more quaint movies where it's basically like they try to treat them as almost like chosen one meritocracies. And the best example I have of that is the quarterback, Kurt Warner, kind of famously within the NFL ranks. It's like he wore his religion on his sleeve. He didn't hide his faith. He prayed and everything openly and everything like that. And they just did like a biopic about him, starring Zachary Levi, I believe it was. And it's one of those things where, like, when you see the movie, like all the advertisements for the movie, it looks super low budget. Like they shot it on like one location, like in a parking lot that they might have had access to, like a high school football field or something to shoot the football scenes. But it's all very much when you see the movie, because they don't address it a lot in the advertisements. But when you see the movie, it's all revolving around like how his faith carried him through. Him and his wife, they were like, listen, we're just going to keep trying. We're going to get to NFL. We won't have these injury setbacks. We won't have this. And those are also the movies that that hit huge in the Midwest, because they're all basically sermons. They are sermons. They're for preaching to the choir. It's like, hey, this is exactly how you want the story to be told. Like, yeah, your talent and your skill got you here, but God got you over the edge. And if you just keep trying and praying, like, it'll work out for you. And I always find that fascinating. In how
it turns out that God was the best performance-enhancing drug after all.
It's like how they take all the agency away from the audience, but that's what they're saying the audience wants. in their depictions of their faith. I find that interesting. Like, does anybody else notice that if you've seen like any of these faith-based type movies, or am I off base in that or something, like reading? Like, how are you seeing those depictions?
I haven't, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I haven't seen any of them. I heard one broken down on a podcast. So can you repeat the question for us, though?
Well, so just if you've seen any faith-based movies, things that kind of like would you think would check off those boxes, have you noticed that there always seems to be a reliance on servitude and just basically handing yourself over to God, to Christ, to your deity of choice? It's just saying like, yeah, you're almost good enough, but you need to give yourself over to God to really be the greatest version of yourself. Have you noticed that in any other faith-based movies? I've seen it in that bunch that I've seen, but I don't want to like paint like with that broad brush because I admittedly have not seen enough of them.
No? No takers? No.
No takers.
Bueller?
I will also say of note, it's more of a fairly recent phenomenon that we have these movies on our radar. And by recent, it's almost 20 years now because, crap, I'm old. But the first big one that broke through that was essentially a mainstream movie was Passion of the Christ. Like, that was the first big faith-based movie that got huge national push because of just what it was about and who was doing it. And then a bunch of others just started slipping in with the radar with it.
Let me give a disclaimer on Passion of the Christ, and then I'll throw it to you, Nun Tribe, because, man, we could make this its own thing.
Yes, I was waiting for this one to come up, actually.
I forgot about this one.
I was holding it back for a little bit.
I'll very briefly answer the last question, which is the premise of handing yourself over to God in order for him to make you the best version of yourself isn't perhaps the worst, quote unquote, Christian message, but it isn't necessarily, I think, what being a Christian is about, because it's not really about you, which is the whole point. Right? It isn't about making you the best version of yourself for you. It's about making you the best version of yourself for whatever God's will is for your life, which could be to die like Jesus. So I mean, there's a case to be said that Christian movies probably could stand to be a lot more depressing and maybe have some bad endings, so to speak. But that's just me, being the guy that reads like I think it's Psalm 88 and goes, yeah, that's life. Psalm 88 is, if you don't know, if you look that one up, if you're a person that just likes to read depressing things, because it doesn't end on a happy note. Anyways, Passion of the Christ is interesting.
Can I give an opener to the Passion of the Christ discussion? So I'm going to tell you that the first time I saw Passion of the Christ was in theaters with my, I guess, youth group. We were just a bunch of people from church who went to go see a damn movie. And I saw it again in college. The Passion of the Christ was a play that had been used to whip up anti-Semitic sentiment, especially in Germany. So there's a level of sensitivity that the director did not bring. In fact, there are a number of things that, scholars who speak Aramaic know that there are certain things that are said in the dialogue, which is none of it is English, and it is done in subtitles. But there are, anti-Semitic statements that are, in there verbally, but they aren't part of the subtitles. So I once said in a company with Jewish folks that Passion of the Christ has anti-Semitic undertones, and I was corrected because they told me that it has anti-Semitic overtones. So I think that, there's a lot to be said about the movie, but we also do know that the director is known to publicly be anti-Semitic, and I think that's present in the work. Right, Mel Gibson had a bit of a drunk swearing on video situation. Did he not?
Yeah, he did. It was more than he basically checked off every I'm a huge bigot box. He was going at Jewish people, black people, just everyone. But yeah, it was right before Passion of the Christ, I believe. for some of it, and then a bulk of it came out afterward, and made everybody looked at it and said, "Okay, that makes sense now." It's like they put the two and two together after they realized, like, oh, that's how he gets down.
Which I do not. You touched on it earlier. I'm always shocked by the cognitive dissonance that goes on with, white supremacists, Christian nationalists, whatever we're calling them today. In this dialogue, it's like that's the main character. I just don't understand it. I don't understand it.
But it made slightly different, but similar. But I do want to come back to Passion of the Christ. I recently watched the Northman, which is a realistic movie about Vikings and kind of that lore and kind of that history. And it goes very much into the Nordic backgrounds and their like religious beliefs and kind of like who they pray to and what they try to get out of it. And that is so directly tied to white supremacy. And specifically, like the movie was showcasing that's like all of the stuff that you hear about alphas and beasts and all this sort of stuff. This is where that stuff is steeped out of. And it's amazing to me how, like, in some depictions, because it's not directly Christianity, people can put that two and two together, like, oh yeah, this is the connection between this lore and white supremacy and how it affects us today. But if you try to present that under the lens of Christianity, they're like, no, we just want to talk about the good parts, only the good parts, and that is it.
And, talking about Passion of the Christ, it is based off, by and large, the Gospel of John, which is written, maybe Jacob, you might be able to speak to this a little bit better, but it's written in a time that really division between Jewish and Christian community was at an all-time high. In fact, it was the time when Jewish religion went in one direction and Christians went in another. So, there's some sour grapes, there's some bad feelings in those writings. And, some of us look at that and say, okay, well, let's not let their biases be our biases. And other people are like, see, I knew anti-Semitism was a good thing to do. So everyone's going to look at that their own way, I guess. But, the Passion of the Christ is definitely, you can write a story about Jesus in any way you want to, but that was sort of the format that Mel Gibson went for.
I will say that I will say this. I do think it's interesting. I don't know if accurate's the right word, but just visually striking to the text in the sense of what being tortured really looks like. I think that's interesting. Just in general, we were talking about It's a Wonderful Life earlier, and certainly, like, for anybody out there that's struggling, I have before as well with suicide, but like that's what he was going to do, is he was going to kill himself. That was what that movie was about. Even though it's presented as like this cute situation, like he was really down and said, no, he was going to murder himself. It was on the table there. So anyways, I say that to say that I think it is somewhat refreshing, if we're being real with people, to present sort of the reality of life. And sometimes that's missing in all media, but certainly media that purports to be Christian in nature can really be just unrealistic about what life really is.
I think that goes back to what I was mentioning before. And then obviously, depending on what I'm watching, I can, this is going to be a little bit, a little gruesome, a little hard to, like, but I'm going to muscle through it. I think because a lot of faith-based, specifically faith-based, like, hey, if we're advertising ourselves as a Christian faith religious movie, they want to try and get as big an audience as possible, and just keeping it within the realm of how likely were you to bring maybe a 6-year-old to see The Passion of the Christ, whereas you're more likely to bring your 6-year-old to see something like The Preacher's Wife with like Denzel Washington and Whitney Houston. It's like, oh, that's just a nice little wholesome Christian
that's
movie.
A jam right there.
I know, but I think, and because of how those movies are usually produced, made, like that sort of thing, they try to cast as wide a net as possible within their own audiences. Whereas a movie like Passion of the Christ, is one of the reasons I brought it up, is it had huge financial backing. Mel Gibson at the time had clout. Mel Gibson had money. Mel Gibson could galvanize some people behind him and say, like, yeah, it's a Christian movie, but come on, you're going to say no to me? And that's how you get hundreds of millions of dollars raised for which is essentially like a 2.5 hour snuff film. Like it's a hardcore depiction of, like you said, this torture, and it's realistic in this depiction. But that wasn't going to get made by anybody else but Mel Gibson to then get that audience.
Well, and let's be honest, that the depiction of torture, it was something, like I said, way back in I'm not going to swing at the year because I'm gonna hit it wrong, but Germany had a lot of issues with anti-Semitism, and these plays were done to drum up violence against the local Jewish communities. And that kind of he took it to another level by being able to say, well, I can show a level of torture so high, and I can make sure everyone knows which minority group should be properly blamed for it. And I agree with both sentiments that you can look at that and be like, yeah, that's torture, and that's part of our religion, and we should think on that. And also, well, and another part of our tradition is using that torture as a springboard for hate.
That's a very good point. Yeah, it's definitely like two different things happening at the same time. And frankly, if I am being charitable to my neighbor, then the second thing is more important. So, which is making sure our neighbors are not hated. That's the most important thing.
Getting jumped on. Yeah. Not sure if I do want to go back now and get away from this more somber thing. I know we could all go off on the Passion of the Christ for hours, but you brought up the Tyler Perry plays and the movies and the Medea aspect of it. And I came up before he had shows, before they were TV shows and movies. I grew up on the plays, getting passed around at barbershops, right, and watching those because I wasn't hugely interested by my family. I had family members that were, so they'd bring home these Medea gospel plays. And I've found it interesting in how when they started to bring those things up to major audiences and get those still made and produced, mostly still self-produced by Perry, he dialed back some of the gospelness of them, just kind of like curving, like rounding off those rough edges, because it was very much an of the time, like collard green circuit gospel play. He toned some of that down, but he's never lost it's all still very much faith-based entertainment, but not advertised as such. And not sure, have you noticed that with those as well, or are you picking up something different?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, he certainly has gotten to I think he's a billionaire, right? Like he got to a place where he was like, yeah, so how do we make an even wider net? If I'm believing the best about the brother, I think he just sort of recognizes that there's that. But that being said, I mean, going all the way back to the plays, I don't know how exegetically accurate some of the Christian messages were there, which kind of probably speaks more to, sort of I think I've heard it explained, sort of denominations that are more sacramental in their in how they express their faith versus ones that are more sort of Holy Spirit, Holy Ghost expressive, and then others that are more knowledge focused. And so many Black Protestant churches definitely sort of do veer into the more Holy Spirit, so when you're thinking about like Pentecostal denominations, certainly not just Black churches, but just the broad over generalization. And so those gospel plays, were catered to that audience. They were, like you said, they're catered to your aunt and collard green, it just elicits a certain vision of aunts and collard greens and grandmas and, your family back home. And so it wasn't so much about necessarily sort of giving a very clear gospel message as much as it was about sort of these broader, general themes, which actually do lend themselves into broader Americana type stuff that you can kind of use and not have to have the Jesus in it, so to speak, at some point, which I think is where he's at. But he's also gotten even a little edgier there, where he's just like, I'm just not even interested in telling that story at all, which makes sense too.
His TV shows have like strayed way from the flock in some regards. But I do think, I'm glad you brought it back full circle to the Americana part of it, because you can also see the old school, almost like 50s, It's a Wonderful Life or Americana in those early movies, where you hear certain people giving advice like, oh yeah, we know your husband beat you, but stick it out for the family, for the marriage, because that's what a good Christian does. And it's like, ooh, right. What? So it's always like those movies, specifically early Tyler Perry stuff, is very interesting to watch, especially now, because I I don't want to give that full attribution for this, but you start to notice a generational divide in especially younger millennials, Gen Z, and how they respond to that versus how their parents did. And that's where you get a lot of people like, oh, why aren't these kids religious anymore? It's like, well, we grew up watching our parents and watching these movies and doing these things. And we're realizing that the way they're speaking to that religion doesn't work for us. We need to find a way, our entertainment that might be within this faith-based arena, but it speaks to us and where we are now, what our ideals and our things are now. And Tyler Perry stuff was not doing that.
Right. Which I'll just share this. I mean, my evangelical tone for anybody that ever talks to me is really certainly like, yes, I believe in the Bible and I follow it and all that stuff. But I kind of alluded to it before. Yeah, this still may be a bad ending for you. And and that actually tends to, at least in my experience, that tends to make people go like, oh, well, like, at least you're not trying to trick me. It's like, nope, I'm not.
I never understood why some people thought being Christian would be something that would remove all their obstacles. Like, Christ himself got crucified. This isn't a story about life being easy. I don't understand how people get there sometimes.
Very funny like turn of how it's gone, considering the like earliest mass distributed form of Christian storytelling was martyrologies. Like we've gone full circle from, or I guess not full circle, but the full half circle from the martyrologies that were like early Christian literary foundations.
Look how bravely this person went to their utter demise. I want to be a Christian now.
Non-monetary prosperity gospel that you find in all these movies.
Which is interesting because if you're tying the prosperity, you know, what's interesting about the martyrology, which I didn't even know was a word. Thank you for teaching me something. That's why I love listening in. What's interesting is they actually did make the most money off doing that. I mean, if we think about these big, huge cathedrals and so on and so forth, and certainly there was some compulsion. It wasn't always just sort of voluntary giving, but it's interesting.
I'm actually glad you brought that up, the cathedral aspect of it, because one of the other things I wanted to hit on, and kind of like the progression of how God and religion is shown in movies, outside of horror, which we didn't really get into, which is the flip side of kind of the farcical aspect of it, where religion and God can be kind of poked at, but not disrespected. And I think two examples of that, one we've kind of talked about, Thor, Love and Thunder, and a movie that just came out, Honk for Jesus, which I think is incredible and hilarious, but it's very much allowing for the wiggle room to see like, hey, this can be ridiculous if in the hands of quote unquote the wrong people. And I do think that it's interesting how it's taken over 100 years of cinema and like popular culture and just depictions of that for people to start to feel like that is almost safe, because you see every generation or so kind of dips their toe in it. Like you get religious that Bill Maher movie that he did where he was making fun of religion, and then just
Religious.
Yes, I couldn't think of the word. Religious.
I have seen it. Yeah, where he basically punches down at everybody and doesn't challenge any like actual theologians who have books on the subjects he's challenging.
Saying, oh, you believe in something? You're an idiot. That's
he at one point he cornered like a gas station preacher who's like, he's a gas station preacher, man, and he's just hitting them hard and fast with these questions. He's like, see, Christians are stupid. I'm like, you this dude has a very specific function.
Yeah. But I do think if you haven't seen Honk for Jesus, it is funny. You should watch it. Sterling K. Brown and Regina Hall are great in it. But if the whole thing is like, hey, a super church loses its congregation, and how do they get them back? And just watching the farcical things they do to try and get people back, instead of just, being a good pastor. He's doing all this other ridiculous stuff. And I like that depiction.
I want to bring something up because I feel like this movie kind of got away with something a little bit here. So Spider-Man 3 is not the most loved of the Spider-Mans, but I think people look back on it now with more love than they did when it first came out, especially Raimi fans. But yeah, there's a point, and Castor Troy, stop me if I remember this wrong, where Eddie Brock is in a church and prays to God to kill Spider-Man.
I knew that was coming.
As the bell is going off in the church, and then, unbeknownst to Brock, Peter Parker is separating from the symbiote above, and it's almost as if God is like nodding to the creation of Venom, that God is almost seems to be behind the villain in this scene. Am I taking it to a weird place, or am I seeing something real?
Not a weird place, but there's two ways you could be taking that. You could take that as Raimi setting someone up to do something essentially sacrilegious. Hey, you're praying for me to hurt someone. That kind of goes against how I operate, at least in modern lenses. So either Eddie, his wishes granted in like a monkey's paw, where they're like, all right, yeah, I'm going to kill Spider-Man. I'm going to let you do it. Or Eddie's being punished for asking to have Spider-Man killed by having a monster bestowed upon him that then makes him get hurt. So there's two ways you could take that, depending on basically how cynical you are.
Okay, well, and there is a sort of willingness that Eddie Brock has for the Venom symbiote that Peter Parker didn't keep. So he did ask for it.
Yeah, it was also a thing when you guys mentioned as well, which is for example, he gets the Venom suit, right? And then always he kind of gets blown up. So maybe that was the reason why, maybe God knew that he was gonna. I mean, in the film, right? If you're analyzing it, maybe that was the decision that was gonna happen. Maybe he gave him the power, but then to be Venom, but then at the end of the day, he ended up blowing up anyway. So maybe that was the idea of it. The other film that I was going to mention, I think you guys have seen it. It's pretty big, but The Passion of the Christ, Mel Gibson, sorry.
Yeah, we Mel Brooks and Mel Gibson are two very different people.
Yeah,
we recently talked about it. So when the recording comes out, you can go back and look at our discussion of The Passion of the Christ, which we discussed could be its own podcast, probably a series.
And also, there's also. I was just gonna say as well, Ida. If you guys ever seen that movie, it's the Polish film where it's a really beautiful film. It's one of my favorite films of all time. It's basically about a Jewish it's like a Jewish how you have what do you call it, the people with gowns. It's like a nun, right? She's trying to be a Jewish nun, this girl, and the way how the movie is filmed is it's by 4:3, and basically there's a lot of space above her head. Every time she's in the church, it's supposed to symbolize that God is always looking at her. And dude, it's one of the most beautiful things I was like, why is there so much
Sounds
space?
like sort of an art house sort of piece.
Yeah, because I was like, why is there so much space over her head? And then I realized the reason why is they show a picture, they show through the mirror, through the window where there's paintings, right? It's actually God.
Glass window.
Yeah, they have how Jesus is on the cross, right? They show him a shot of it, and then they show her, and it's supposed to symbolize that everything she's doing, even if she goes bed, God is always going to be there. Do everything she's going to, because he's obviously judging her for things she does. She can't just run off and do something else.
So is this about God judging a Jewish person?
No, sorry. What am I even saying? It's basically what do you call it? Well, it's a Polish film, so from what I'm guessing, from how I saw the movie, was that what do you call it? This nun, she's basically being kind of trained in it's kind of like school, when you have nuns that are trying to basically just being normal nuns, right? But they always have God above their heads because of the framing of the film. And then throughout the movie, you see how that changes because she wants to leave as throughout the movie. And I think that was really great. That's what I liked about the movie. It was a lot of symbolism. I think you guys would like it if you guys are into
Can you drop that in the comments, the name of it?
Yeah, definitely. And I would also say, I don't know if you guys ever see First Reformed. That's really good as well. for like religion and stuff. And there's also obviously Departed. That's another film, but you have to like look between the lines with that one.
I had one, but I want to make sure I'm not interrupting someone else's thought. Non-Tribe, did you have something?
Oh no, I was just asking them to drop that movie in the comments.
Yeah, definitely drop in comments so we can all be on the same page at some point. I want to mention, because we're talking about, so I want to pose a question. Here we go. The original Boondock Saints, I'm only talking about the first Boondock Saints movie. Is God a character? I have loved that movie. I've seen it many times. I think it's an interesting place where the suggestion is that God is nodding in favor of certain violence a little more clearly than my last example. I think that I've had people tell me that, yeah, God is an active character, and that basically the plot armor they essentially have is because they have God's favor. So I don't know if this is a person bringing their own theology to this, or if that they've listened to the director's commentary and I haven't.
What's the movie called?
Boondock Saints.
Boondock Saints. Is it Born to Run? Is that what the movie's called? I might be wrong.
No, the title is Boondock Saints. Like, that is the title.
I'm sorry. I'm assuming that everyone knows what Boondock Saints is. Have you guys seen? I assume Troy,
I have not seen it.
You have not seen it. Non-Tribe, have you seen it?
I'm familiar with it. I just haven't seen it.
I can give a quick plot breakdown, like
Yeah,
a quick
would
and dirty
you?
version.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
basically, two Irish lads from Boston live in a rough and tumble neighborhood. They get into a bar fight with some Russian mafia types, and then in the course of defending themselves, they kill the two gentlemen. But they are heralded as the Saints of Boston because they beat up two mafia types and two figures. So they kind of get off like with self-defense. While they're overnight in jail, the two brothers wear rosaries. They are pretty religious, but not like basically like they are.
They wear rosaries.
Yeah,
they
wear
carry
rosaries.
guns. They say a prayer before they kill people, executioner style.
See, that
And they
happens
see
later.
themselves as a sort of it seems like they see themselves as crusaders.
And that's what I was going to get to. While they're in jail the night after the first incident, they both have like a simultaneous like vision and call to God. Like a storm's happening, they get basically baptized by a leaking crack in the wall, and they take it upon themselves to say, like, no, we are the weapons of God. We are Bartleby and Loki. We are going out to condemn crime. And yeah, they say a prayer before they execute people. I am of two minds about how that operates. I either think the movie is being told from their perspective, which makes them unreliable narrators and they're justifying their crime, or the other side where it's like, actually, yeah, God is giving them a tacit nod and saying, like, I'm good with this. I need to bring some fire and bring, like, show my hellfire and bring that back because people were being like, not putting respect on my name and thinking I was just too passive. Knowing what I know about the creator of Boondock Saints, I'm leaning more towards the latter and him saying, yeah, God accepted this because Troy Duffy is a madman, and that's the type of thing that, I mean, he doubles down on it in the sequel. So yeah, I think it actually, that is what the director / writer interpretation is that, yeah, God's okay with what they're doing and actively helping them.
That's the one with Norman Reedus, right? And
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that would, it looks really interesting. So I'm guessing that they just thought that they were like they wanted to. I'm guessing they ended up being in a bar fight, and then they actually were hailed as the saints of the was it the church, right?
They
Well,
take out
they
mafias, but they're not. It's suggested that this misunderstood. How do they frame it? There's this story that is not accurate from Boston where a woman was being murdered and no one called 911 because everyone else assumed someone else had done it. That I don't think it's actually true, but it's been passed along on the internet and even before the internet. I
that
think
that
the
story
beginning
has
is
been debunked. There is a version of it that is true, but that version of the
right.
story is
But
not true.
the beginning of the movie seems to suggest that they are the children of that woman. Again, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
And so, like as you mentioned with, I think one of you guys mentioned Loki, right? And is it Bobicor? Or I can't remember the other name, but it was almost
Bartleby and Loki.
We
yeah.
had to get to Dogma eventually because it's the inspiration for our icon, Buddy Christ.
Yeah, like it's kind of like, like, is that Norse mythology, right? Like the way
Yeah,
it with
Loki's a Norse mythological figure. He's got some interesting. There's some interesting like mythography about him.
Yeah.
He might be a little more Christian influenced than we tend to assume, but yeah.
I think he's just an archangel in Dogma. I don't think he has a connection to the Norse character, although they are definitely tricksters. So maybe that's why they gave it the namesake. Again, I'm sure there's a director's commentary that might shed some light on it.
I haven't listened to the Dogma commentary in quite some time, but that Kevin Smith and his relationship with Catholicism, he's exercising a lot through that movie, and that's part of the reason I even brought it up too.
I think it's a really interesting movie, especially because it talks about a lot of issues that are valid to people now and have been in the news lately. But also Alan Rickman, man, it's a great movie to stop by if you're just missing Alan Rickman and need to see his acting.
Yeah. Oh, I'm definitely gonna like add it onto my list because this looks really cool. It seems like at first they might
Dogma is not for the theologically faint of heart. At one point, they are literally attacked by a shit demon. So it's not the most highbrow stuff, but it is a fun ride that makes some really interesting notes, especially if you do come from a Catholic setting, because I think that's, like Castor Troy said, where he's speaking from and maybe even who he's speaking to. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, he's absolutely speaking directly to. I remember that because he went to protest for his own movie just to see if people like actually didn't like it or if they were just protesting it because they thought they weren't going to like it. He would talk to people. He was like, no, I'm making fun of the stuff, but I'm making fun of it because I grew up in it and this is what I know. And now I'm at the point where I can actually poke at it a little bit.
Well, and for those who don't know, I think it's pretty close to the beginning, if not like one of the opening scenes where George Carlin, God rest him, is, I believe, the Bishop of New York or Boston. I'm not sure. And
Jersey.
Jersey. Oh, of course. Jersey. Stupid. I should have known that. But in order to try to improve the morale of the church and try to raise spirits, they released the new Buddy Christ icon to try to put a new spin on Catholicism as part of their Catholicism Wow, I think he called the campaign.
That is it.
Damn.
So that icon is, and I believe always has been, the symbol of our subreddit, Dank Christian Memes.
So
yeah,
thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. Actually,
did you have a movie you wanted to mention about religion, God, or thereabouts?
Absolutely. Two, I guess, that I feel like are related to each other, in my opinion. Kubrick, his movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, and The Shining. I think they're like fairly related in the sense of theme, and I think that they're actually opposites. That 2001: A Space Odyssey is, I guess you could say, going into the into the darkness, to the void, and I guess coming out on the other side. And then The Shining is, again, going into that darkness, the void, Overlook Hotel, if anybody's familiar with that film. And unfortunately being taken over by, all the, basically by your demons. And,
do you mean the scene where, like, well, I know, I kind of understand with 2001 because in 2001 there's a moment where a monkey throws a bone in the air and it actually syncs up with someone in space. like a spaceship going up as well, and it's supposed to signify like the chain, like basically like an evolution to it,
Right.
and then after that, there's like black void, and that shows up near the monkeys, and then no one knows what it is. And because when you first watch the movie, the first half of the movie, well, from the beginning is like darkness. You don't know what's going on, and then then near the ending of the movie, you kind of see. You don't see what it is, but you can clearly see that it's some sort of like this is not from God. Like this is something from.
I mean, how do you know that though?
No, I mean like
Why
as
do you
in
say that?
like it's not from our world, if that makes sense. Because everything, like nothing from my view, like nothing is as black as that. Like,
But how
Right, your
is
mic seems to be going in and out, so watch out
but
for
I
that.
but I guess devil's advocate, haha. Just because something isn't, very clear and okay, so if you want to talk about, from God, I mean, if you look at the Bible, half the stuff that's in there was very like to be very to put it lightly, anxiety inducing. I mean, get in the worms, get in a whale's mouth, go talk to these people who want to kill you. Do this stuff that's basically going to get you killed. Like, I don't think that a monolith and darkness and going into the void of something that you're unfamiliar with is any different. So that's why I bring it up.
I would actually say, so to Kubrick and specifically to 2001, I think one of the messages I took, I've watched the movie probably since college, but one of the messages I took from that is that we don't know as much as we think we do. And that's why I think that opening is so prescient and I like it so much because it's like, hey, these Neanderthals, these monkeys, they, for as far as they know they created a tool. They got the bone, they got the stick, they can use that. Then the monolith appears before them almost as like a thing of, I would say it is an act of God showing like, hey, chill a little bit. Like you're still figuring this out and I can show you that. And then you see when they throw the bone up in the air and it fast forwards out to space, it is now us in the monkey's position. Like, hey, we've created this thing, we can use it. And it's like, nope, there's still a bunch out there that you don't get yet. Relax a little bit. And it's kind of like just that checking and balances, because that's how Kubrick he was a very strange man, but I like the way he illustrated things like that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I mean, in order to make any sort of art that kind of pushes the boundaries, you have to be a bit strange. Like there's no way around it. But and I agree. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I'm not so much focusing on the opening. I think maybe, in my opinion, I think people focus on that a little too much. I'm more so focusing on the actual sort of pace of the movie as a whole, and and how essentially this person is going up against this computer, Hal, who is, I guess you could say, maybe a metaphor for, our logic, our brain telling us not to do something because it literally does not make any sense. Whereas they're trying to go somewhere that doesn't make sense. And there's like a conflict of interest. So they have to turn off the logic system and go to this place where it almost seems like they're destined to die. But they don't. And they come out the other side as the star child, I guess you could say.
It is essentially, shorthand, it's a leap of faith. You're turning off your logic and you're taking a legitimate leap of faith and going like, all right, we just got it. I am compelled to do this. And I do like that depiction if we are saying either the monolith or even Hal are instruments to either show you a God or show you God's might and what you should have in humility. And then, kind of coming full circle, we were talking about before, giving yourself to something greater than you to better yourself. That's how you can interpret it. One ending of 2001. It's like, hey, we got to turn the logic off. We have to do this. This just feels right, and I need to get it done. To go back to the other film you mentioned, The Shining. Kubrick did what he wanted to do with that. I mean, Stephen King famously does not like the adaptation of his work.
Yeah, I think Stephen King doesn't really understand his own work.
Sometimes, especially during his like when he was coked and alcohol.
Well,
riddled with everything.
not only that, but I mean that's funny, bro. Not only that, but like I mean, you got flying like fire hoses and stuff like that. Kind of completely just. I don't know. I love Stephen King, but I feel like he just kind of goes a little overboard after a while sometimes.
He's very much a man that's just like he also famously writes stream of conscious. Like he just writes and writes and writes and he edits on the back end.
True.
So he's very much I just got to get the ideas out. But I think the through line of The Shining, like you said, is being taken over by your demons, figuratively and literally. Like it's an author who is plagued by alcoholism and tends to abuse his child, who's trying to work on that, and those are his demons figuratively coming at him, while literal demons are working on him too within that hotel. And it's like that darkness is overtaking him and his fight against it. And you could either say that is a depiction of religion, or you could say it's just a depiction of no faith. Like what happens when you don't believe in anything, not even your own institution of family. Because had he just retreated into his family so they could take care of each other, likely he has a better outcome. So there's a few ways to take that.
Yeah, and also just to everybody else listening, I'm hopefully I'm not hogging it up or taking up too much time. I'm just responding because I actually like the convo. But I think that when it comes to the Overlook Hotel, I think that personally, if I understand what you're saying correctly, I don't think it's actually really either of them, although I won't say that it can't be interpreted as such. I think that the Overlook Hotel is more so just an amalgamation of his psyche and just his world in general, because he goes there and he's basically met by the hotel foreman, and he gives him this very, terse kind of like very upfront, like very almost like otherworldly kind of talk. It has this very odd kind of feel to it, like he's in. Anyways, he's talking to him, but he's basically saying this job, it's not hard, but it's vigorous. Like you have to take care of things, you have to check on things, and I think that's kind of basically an analogous to our lives. It's not necessarily hard, a lot of things, but it takes a lot of focus and a lot of energy. And after a while, like he didn't really take care of the hotel at all. He was just trying to write, and eventually it's like all these things kind of come up to the surface, and then next thing you know, he's overrun, by this, by these things. It's like you get frustrated, you get irritated, something is going to take you over because your psyche's been compromised, right? Whether you call it possession or something else. But anyways, I guess that's pretty much the long and short of it. But
and I agree with that. In essence, it's kind of an offshoot. Kind of what I said. What I was saying is, he wasn't tending to the hotel, and if you could take that one step further for like the metaphor, he wasn't really taking care of himself. He wasn't taking care of his home. He wasn't taking care of his family.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And you said like he was trying to write. Keep in mind, he wasn't actually writing anything. He was only writing that same phrase over and over.
Oh, true. I didn't even remember that. What was it? All work, no play.
And no play make Jack a dull boy. He just wrote that over and over again for thousands of pages because he wasn't. Yes, he was a writer. He probably wanted to do that, but he wasn't even tending to that. So he was eventually overtaken by the evil. Like when you're isolated, all that's left is your own vices and your own psyche. And if you haven't tended to that the right way, it will turn on you. And that's what I take from that movie. And that's why I said, like, if he had tended to the hotel and tended to his family, if you believe the hotel is actually haunted, which I do, in terms of like what they're presenting to you, but you're protected from it if you have something to like latch onto, you'll be fine. Because not everybody that goes to the Overlook dies.
True. You know what? So not to cut you off, but
no, go ahead.
You know what? It just occurred to me. So like, okay, so like, the phrase as above, as below, right?
Yeah, I know what that means. Yeah.
So like, there's a lot of zooming in and out in the film. And I think that kind of is analogous to basically like it's almost like a spiritual magnification in the sense of, okay, so the main, again, forgive me, I forget the names. I've watched it so many times, but I forget the names. The main character, Jack Nicholson's character, he's himself. He's his own ego. I think his son is sort of representative of his, I guess maybe you could say his sort of pure self, spirit, I guess. The wife, kind of like your, I guess, voice of reason, maybe you could say. I don't know. I mean, I won't get too deep into it. Try not to make it be one for one, but basically, he, geez, I think I'm starting to get lost in my own fucking train of thought.
Well, why don't we take a quick break and give equivalent? Do you want to introduce yourself and bring up a divine piece of cinema or media?
Hello. My name is Equivalent. I didn't choose it. I just joined Reddit a year ago, and this is a weird name they gave me. I am running around doing errands, and I love to talk to people. And this group's name was very interesting. Give me a second to think about a movie that has
Yeah, take your time.
or
I'm going to throw one out here if that's okay. Is there anyone else who wants to speak up before I throw out my example?
I guess I have one, but you can go first.
No, you go ahead, Jacob. We've heard from me plenty so far.
All right. I wanted to bring up one of my favorite movies in the world that will be a surprise to no one who's heard me talk on here before. Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, right.
It's an explicitly religious universe to it.
Yeah.
And, the entire plot revolves around the biblical object of the Ark of the Covenant. And I find it absolutely fascinating how much cultural weight this movie has in bringing the Ark of the Covenant into the mainstream.
No one would know what the Ark of the Covenant was.
Object that is just associated with lost divine power. Obviously it's always been seen as sacred by different groups. There's a church in Ethiopia that claims to have it and all that. But
can we see it? No.
Even in Temple of Doom as well, I would say that as well. That's another one.
I mean, it's a through line for all
I've never seen
Indiana
those
Jones movies. I would say watch those if you just like good adventure, but they're really well done. But I've also used that example, saying, hey, the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, all those things, which is I still don't like the fourth Indiana Jones movie just as a movie, but I didn't balk so much at the whole alien side of it, because the whole running theme through all these movies is all these things that we think exist in this weird in-between space between, is it real, is it not? All that stuff is real in the Indiana Jones movies. That's the whole point. So aliens would be real. Religious artifacts would have legitimate power that you can see and it can affect you. But I agree. I love that it brought it to the mainstream just as casual conversation. Yep, the Ark of the Covenant is real. It can be vengeful and exhibit wrath and harm you if you respect it and kind of just don't look at it. I love that so much.
Yeah. No, I was also just gonna say that there was just two things I was gonna know, because I think Noensen said it, which was there's other thing I was gonna say about The Shining, right? Which is that which was so in The Shining, basically the way how I see the film is that what do you call it? I think it's Jack Nicholson, right? His character, he never left the hotel. He still is pretending as if he's still he goes into the interview because he believes that there was someone before him. But even when he shows up with the butler, right? He even says to him, "You've always been here. You've never left the hotel." And then he starts going mad, right? And then at the end of the movie, it shows a picture from 19. I can't remember, the 19th century.
Right. Yeah, it was clearly before him.
Clearly before him, and he's actually in the photo. So it makes you think oh wait, is this what is that supposed to symbolize, right? And it's Does that mean like he's always been there? Is there different routes? Because the only person who truly knows where it is probably is either in the book or Stanley Kubrick himself. You know, like he probably wanted you to figure it out on your own.
Well, the only part that kind of sticks out to me that comes to mind is it's odd because because you could see, you know, in the beginning, like they're at home, and of course Danny Torrance, you know, little boy, he's at home, and you know his mom's at home, and they hop in the car, and there's like that maybe 2-minute scene of them like going through the mountains and winding through the canyons and all that on the way to the hotel. So I definitely see what you're saying, and to be honest, I don't even really know what to make of it. But
you know what it might have been. You know what it might have been. It might have also been right with, because you know Danny, right? When he goes up to, forgot the character's name.
Halloran.
Yeah. When he goes up to him, he says that you have the same thing as he does, which is he has the shining, the basically the thing that I'm guessing he could kind of like he has an ability that only him and Danny have, and I'm guessing that probably Danny is the one.
You want to get sued? It's the Shinin.
Yeah, it's the Shinin, right? Which is like, that's the.
I'm gonna pivot us, guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm gonna strong arm the conversation here for a moment, because I want to bring us to the Da Vinci Code, and it is a movie. It was also a book, and I knew the book was a big deal because I was serving as a deacon at a church. And everyone was talking about it. Like a lot of people were reading the book. So my question is, to what extent is the Da Vinci Code sort of a ripoff of Indiana Jones and the Quest for the Holy Grail?
I've never seen it, so yeah.
I've seen it. It's a really good film, and also I've read the book. What do you call it? Well, the thing is with Raiders of the Lost Ark is like, I mean, it technically isn't Raiders of the Lost Ark an original movie. It's not like a book or a series or anything like that. It's just
Raiders of the Lost Ark is original. I'm making the point that Dan Brown is sort of robbing the formula, but making sure to sprinkle, he takes the sort of Quest for Holy Grail in a different direction. And I think that's pretty consistent between the book and the movie. I did actually read the book and I did actually watch the movie, and they were movies, but I think they really captured a lot of people's imagination, and I think got people interested in non-canonical gospels that are not part of the biblical tradition. I think people got a little curious with that, and the Dead Sea Scrolls, which Jacob has explained before, is a bit of a misnomer.
I wouldn't say that is necessarily a ripoff. I think in the terms of like anybody that's taken an improv class, it is very much a yes and situation. Whereas Raiders of the Lost Ark is, in all the Indiana Jones movies, is George Lucas and Steven Spielberg saying, let's create the serials and adventures that we liked as a kid and wrap it up in like this intrigue of religion. Still technically kind of taboo in the early 80s in a way. Like, notice they talk about God in a very reverential way, but it's like also we're exploring the realistic sides of that in universe like that. He's like, hey, this stuff's legit, it's here. Like, Indiana Jones as a character has gotten like multiple examples of the real and true life existence of God multiple times, and he doesn't tell people. He's like, hey, I've seen the Ark of the Covenant and see what we can do. Don't worry about it. We're going to put it in a box. Top men know where it is. Whereas the Dan Brown book is very much taking on, all right, yeah, we can do adventure in sort of a realistic tinge, but what it's doing is playing on kind of like that inherent societal thing of just believing in conspiracies, where, hey, all this stuff has a deeper meaning. And if you put this way, you put this way, you can see the stonemasons and the third eye, and you can hide here, and a weird albino fellow trying to kill you.
It really did add a little fuel to the conspiracy fire, didn't it?
And also, just this is my knock on the book, it made people that didn't usually read a lot feel like they were really smart, because the book is actually really short, and it's just like it clips along. Like, you don't have time enough to think about the logical fallacies that are happening in that book, because it just keeps moving and like get you from set piece to set piece. But just in terms of theme and execution, it's very much like, hey, let's just one up what Indiana Jones is in terms of exploring these ideals.
I think we also forget that Indiana Jones might have put a lot of these things on the screen to a popular audience for the first time, but the genre of adventure literature for ancient artifacts is something that is much older and goes back. It's literally 5 centuries old, like the quest for El Dorado and all that. And finding the mines of King Solomon in southern Africa at Great Zimbabwe or whatever. Like, people have been writing about this stuff for centuries, and it's sort of the modern iteration of that. So I think a lot of these movies, like Indiana Jones, holds a lot of cultural weight in the same way that Lord of the Rings holds a lot of cultural weight. But just as Tolkien didn't invent fantasy, George Lucas also didn't exactly invent the historical mystery adventure in a way. In fact, a lot of people have tried to make these stories about themselves, like Heinrich Schliemann, the archaeologist who in the early 1800s named the Mycenaean civilization and also found the site of Troy. He very much played up this idea where he was an adventurer, going out to find the lost remnants of the Trojan War, because he was just absolutely obsessed with the Iliad. And so this whole dynamic is played into this tradition of movies that we now have. It's all part of.
I have another title, but I want to make sure I'm giving other people a chance. Equivalent, do you have one, or are you still just thinking? I want to make sure I'm not leaving you out over there.
No, you're perfectly fine. I'm enjoying listening to this conversation. I don't get to hear anyone talk about this ever.
So I'm going to go for a little one. I don't know how much we'll have to say on it, but the Peanuts, Charlie Brown Christmas movie, they spend a lot of time, meandering around about consumerism, which is a little surprising. I wonder how that would play if it was released today. But the end of the cartoon is a reading from the Gospels about the infancy narrative, and that I believe I did see some, sort of behind the scenes stuff. They were pretty aware of what they were doing. I think that's in the 60s. I forget which year. But they were, going out on a bit of a limb. And I think because it was a cartoon, but they did it with reverence, it played well. I think it has a pretty good place in memory. I don't think that there's a lot of Christian moms shaking their fists at Charlie Brown, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, I don't think you're wrong. I haven't read up on the history of specifically the reaction to that, but that's very much a Charles Schulz thing. He, for whatever his own identity was in terms of religion, he walked the talk in terms of, I want to be inclusive. I do think that was very much a studio call for them to have the prayer read the way it was at the end, but they also knew what they could get away with because it's also through they were using a Christmas special. So once you're using a Christmas special, you can kind of, for lack of a better term, get away with more Christianity than you could if it was just a random Saturday any other day. It's no, we know people are, by and large, are going to be understand this is kind of baked into what we're talking about. I do think it's interesting that more Christmas, specifically Christmas movies, don't try to do things like that, where they actually talk about, get a little bit more scripture in there, talk about the true meaning of Christmas beyond just, hey, love your friends and make sure you take care of everybody. It's no, this is it's Christmas. Christ is in the name of the holiday. We should be able to talk about that part, but they don't. And I think that was actually a really big swing that they took in doing so at the time.
Well, it's interesting. It reminds me of the song "Little Drummer Boy" in the same sense, right? I mean, it's a Christmas song that some people don't realize is sort of it's about Jesus getting a present. But I mean, it's such a quaint song that people don't even really think about it in that sense.
You sound like you are a person out and about in the world.
think a lot of what the change in Christmas movies is really just the market. If you look at Hallmark and their Christmas movie factory, the whole reason that there's all these like cookie cutter Christmas stories is just that they've found a formula that sells to the largest crowd possible, and that crowd, less people are going to be bothered by a conspicuous absence of religious messages than an explicit inclusion of them. And so it's just easier to sell something that casually leaves it out without addressing it, or if it does address it, addresses it in a way that's very adjacent to the actual subject matter.
Oh yeah, I 100% agree. I still think it's funny that nobody even really tries anymore, because it's weird that everybody kind of knows they get the pass if they're making a Christmas movie, but nobody's taking advantage of it anymore. And yeah, we get these cookie cutter Hallmark Fox Family Christmas movies, which I still adore. I love them. I specifically love the woman goes back to her small town and experiences a real Christmas again, and then falls in love with like a carpenter or something like that. Those are my favorite versions of those movies.
Oh, that's my mom's favorite movies.
Oh boy. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of miss. I really enjoy like films that I guess kind of like what you guys were saying. Put things in there, but they don't necessarily like bop you over the head with it. I'd like to definitely see more of that. I mean, they don't have to be as dark as maybe The Shining or 2001, which I really actually don't think are very dark at all. But it would be nice,
I can throw out ideas all day, but I don't. I don't want to steal the show from the others.
What ideas?
Oh, I just movie ideas that have some religious significance.
I have one on
Please,
the marketability discussion, because there is, I think, a type of religious movie that we haven't talked about here, which is the movie that has a almost intrinsic religious audience but isn't explicitly religious. And the ultimate example would be Disney's Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because we know for a fact that C.S. Lewis was writing with Christian analogies in mind, and they are still obvious in the Disney version. And plenty of Christian parents were at the time, and probably still are if they have the DVDs or wherever it's being streamed nowadays, to show their kids The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe for a religious story. And yet that was made by a studio that didn't market it that way, but I think intended to have that audience at the same time, if that makes sense. And so I'm wondering if anyone else thinks of like other movies that have this dynamic where it's trying not to be explicitly a religious movie, but the market is, at least in large part, as a religious movie.
I was under the impression that C.S. Lewis was a little more direct with his trying to be perhaps a bit religious, whereas Tolkien was very wink and nod about it, and if you ask him, he'll deny it, sort of thing. But I don't have a deep understanding of either of those authors, so I apologize.
In terms of just marketing, I can speak to the movie side of it more, because
I think that's the question anyway. So yeah.
But I know a lot of what the marketing for things like that, the Golden Compass, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, a lot of the Tolkien movies, what they're doing is honestly just playing on the ignorance of a wide audience. And we kind of touched on it here. Like, we want this stuff in our movies, but you don't want it to hit you over the head. You don't want to beat you over the head. What they can do is just take works that already did that and just say like, oh, they don't explicitly say any of this, but it's obvious what it is. And there's enough people that will go along with it because it's not explicitly said. I'm going to use a bit of an extreme example here, but it gets the point across. The same way people will say something like they don't recognize that something might be racist because the thing isn't saying that it is explicitly racist, even though you can tell, like, oh yeah, that's kind of racist, isn't it? That's what these works are getting away with. On the better side of things, we're just like, no, here's a whole bunch of religious parables and work and framework and ideals. We just don't call anybody God and Jesus. We call them Aslan. We call them this, and they're still filling those same roles, but they don't have to call it that. And boom, you get a wider audience with the same message.
I guess my question is, what movies do you guys like or know of that are very obscure, that aren't even? Because I mean, I think that yes, while those those movies definitely fit, but I feel like they're even sort of like, I guess, somebody who isn't even super heavy into religion or faith, that they would still be able to suss it out and be like, oh, okay, I get it, Aslan. You know what I mean? So like, what movies or films do you guys know or like or don't like that are very, like, you really have to kind of dig, you know, and aren't they're not a Da Vinci Code, they're not a Ark of the Covenant, they're not like that, but something.
I have one, and to me, as a student of theology and religion and world religion, that it seems obvious to me, but I'm guessing it isn't to everyone. The Matrix movies, and I'm just going to say the first three Matrix movies.
No Matrix either. Definitely not.
Okay. Well, because the Matrix makes reference to a lot of different religions.
Absolutely.
So that's what the part that I think is like, sure, people are going to recognize the Jesus-y stuff. It's pretty obvious. Yeah. But there's some Buddhist and some Hindu stuff that is sometimes subtle. Sometimes they're hitting you over the head with it. But, you know, the audience, depending on who they are, where they're from, may or may not be recognizing, like how many people recognize Keanu Reeves's Neo as Jesus would also recognize him as a Buddha figure. And would they be upset if they knew people like from other religions might have viewed him as something of a Buddha figure?
I think there's a lot of movies in general where they tell a general message that could be interpreted through a religious angle. Like, for example, Jurassic Park is not an explicitly religious movie in any way, but it does have a theme of humanity playing God throughout it. And that's explicitly stated by several.
Nowhere in the Bible does it say that Jesus was not a dinosaur. Jurassic Park Christian film, I can accept this.
I have one that's not necessarily an obscure movie, but is an obscure religious movie. It's RoboCop. RoboCop is a Christ. RoboCop is a Christ analogy. So much so that he literally walks on water by the end of it. But it is a man sacrificed for the greater good who is then resurrected to then save the city. Like, it's all in there. It's big, broad strokes and tiny little nuanced details. And by the end, he's like accepted, like, yep, I just have to live this life for, like, instead of going off to, you know, to paradise forever. He comes back. He's like, no, I'm going to live amongst the people, and I will personally take care of them, because it's still an 80s action movie. But yeah, has a lot of religious undertones if you know to look for them. Like, somebody told that to me when I was 15. I couldn't realize I didn't see it before. It's like, oh crap, yeah, you're right.
That's really interesting, to be honest. I guess maybe a more specific sort of like focus on that question is, do you guys know of, like, or dislike any film / movie cinema where maybe it's not a Christ analogy, but more of, it includes faith, but it's not a Christ analogy, if that's not too difficult to
Blade Runner
answer. Blade Runner? Oh, okay. Why?
Blade Runner is entirely about this, like, power differential between a created group and a creator group, and the rebellion of the created against its creator. I took a class in undergrad that was called Bible and Quran and Literature and Film, and we looked at how that film in many ways parallels biblical narratives about the fall of man and the fall of Lucifer, and how the replicants in I don't know if I can do it justice in this explanation, but the replicants essentially are inferior beings in that they live a certain amount of time before they die, and they are aware of this, but they still struggle for their autonomy and to see themselves as having some sort of meaning. And so it's a very like negative relationship between creator and created, a sort of like Paradise Lost-esque framing of it. But you can read Blade Runner as a very explicitly religious movie through that angle.
So then, what about the creators, though? Like, I think the replicants. I didn't even think about that, the replicants thing. But if the replicants are the created, then the creators, then
Are
what
us.
is that?
They're humankind, and it's basically a variant on the Frankenstein story. It's the idea of like what happens when we turn around and as imperfect beings take the role of God with our own creation, right? And I do not have the it's been so long since I watched it. I don't know if I can explain that perfectly.
Oh, it's all good, man. I get the gist of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Just however you can explain it. I appreciate it.
Yeah. That's basically what I got.
I'm trying to think. All the ones I'm thinking of that are popping in my head, they're not fully obscure, or they are very clearly like Christianity based. But I do think I like them in their messaging. And the first one that comes to mind to me is it's a comedy that came out in 2000. It's Bedazzled with Brandon Fraser, where he literally just sells his soul to the devil to like try to get like a perfect life. But I do like that how they put a balance to it. Like, one, he gets a set amount of wishes that he can make, and two, it's recognizing that he is a good person. So all the positions he's put in is testing how good he actually is. Like, yeah, you want this thing, but we're going to shortchange you on one end. So, oh yeah, I made you rich and powerful and good looking and handsome, but you're also a drug kingpin. What are you going to do with that? And he still wants to be the good person he is, but realizing he's a drug kingpin. So he has outs, and he's just balancing that out. But I do think I like how it's basically the parable of be careful what you wish for, and like looking inward and all that sort of thing, but it's framed in such a way it's like, no, the devil's a real person that will plot against you. You can interact with her in this case, which also means there's good working on your side. You just have to be willing to accept it. And so I love stories like that, where it's still the onus is on the person to make the decisions, and they're not just being completely manipulated.
Yeah. I mean movies that don't have clear. I mean, that's really clear, though. Like, I mean, you literally have a, deal with the devil, Mephistophely, whatever. Anyways, you get what I'm trying to say. Kind of Faustian kind of thing going on. I mean, films that are not that. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I'm picking up. It's just harder for me to pull them right now.
So what you're saying is you don't want us to talk about Angels in the Outfield?
No.
Got it.
All right, let me bring one up, and I'm going to question whether or not this is sort of an atheist's kind of religious movie. I'm going to bring up Stargate, and I'm going to try to focus mostly on the movie, but there is a TV show behind it.
Okay, Stargate.
Wherein the theology that is present is a slave theology from ancient Egypt. And that, our Ra is supposedly an alien that's just taken possession of a human body. But, he is telling his slaves that he is Ra, the sun god, and they are to write, they are to have no writing, and they are to follow him. So, our good old fashioned American G.I. Joes come across the Stargate and liberate these people from their false Egyptian gods. So it almost feels like an atheist's retelling of Exodus in some ways. I don't think it's trying to nod super hard to that, but it is, taking deities and saying, oh yes, these aliens are going to use these deities as a system to manipulate you. Was that adjacent to what you had in mind, perhaps?
It's basically it's just like and again I do apologize. I'm trying to be as clear as I can, but yeah, just any movies that don't, again, you can't point to something directly and be like, oh, and then basically draw a connecting line,
a direct religious parallel.
Yeah, like it's too easy. Like I'm curious about movies or even books or so that just like, it's clear that there is a touch.
How about the Force in Star Wars? That Jedi are sometimes referred to as being religion. But
that's.
It seems like you're just telling us all the movies you don't want us to talk about.
No. I get it, but if you understand what I'm saying, is those are.
Do you have an example?
Clear. Yeah. Okay. So there's this one film called The Green. Let me see if I can find it. It's called like. Actually, if you'll give me like a minute. Give me a minute.
Sure, take your time.
That gives us time to talk about angels in the outfield.
Yeah, right.
Stargate.
Yeah, I like Stargate though. I really like that one.
Well, and then the TV show, just to go a little bit further, like when they go across the Stargates, like they frequently find humans who are enslaved by some god, be it Egyptian, Greek, or otherwise. So they borrow from that pantheon a lot. And one of the arguments they're frequently having is these are false gods. So they are not worthy of your worship. They're actually aliens enslaving you. Here's some guns. We're Americans. Let's help you out.
It's important to realize, though, that Stargate also is drawing like directly off of Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods, to the point where it's credited in the movie. So like it is drawing pretty much off of the foundational works of modern ancient astronaut theory. And they just decided to make it
100%. It's a conspiracy theory come to life.
Yeah.
Oh, I just realized another movie. That movie itself is not obscure, but the messaging is decidedly religious and specifically Catholic. Groundhog Day.
Oh, yeah.
It is a man that has to learn through self-sacrifice, not sacrifice, but like learning to live for others. He has to break from his routines of his sinning and his selfishness and all that. And he learns that, if you take the timing over hundreds of years, but it's him learning to be less selfish through giving, through living for others, that he picks up and he can actually escape the cycle of living the same day over and over again. You realize it's a religious tale, one, when somebody points it out to you, but also it's kind of what you realize it's about. The act of unselfishness isn't by accident. Like he has to be. So it's purgatory. Unselfish.
Is his repetitious life purgatory essentially?
He's living in a purgatory state. It kind of doesn't fully stick the landing because he is kind of selfishly going after the woman to be unselfish, but you could take that as his love for her is actually truly true and altruistic. But yeah, it's basically like it's him living through Lent for 1,000 years. It's like, all right, what do I need to give up now to get the heck out of here? And that's what the movie's about.
So isn't Scrooge the same thing then?
Almost, except for Scrooge is directly like it's a Christmas Carol, so it's directly a religious story.
Yeah,
I was going to say Christmas Carol is a pretty religious, but also not religious thing.
I thought of a very blatant one. I did look up some that aren't as blatant, but I always forget that it exists. It's called The Devil. It's the elevator one from like 2010.
Oh, the M. Night Shyamalan movie, Devil. Yeah.
Oh, right. The toast? Is that the toast buttered down one?
Yeah, where the guy's like, you could tell the devil's around because everything just goes slightly better. Yep, it's that one.
I was thinking about it. I was like, oh, yes, this one has religion in it. I can do this. It's very obvious, but if you wanted one less obvious, technically a lot of Disney movies do it all the time. The most recent one that they said did it was like Frozen, because the main sister with the ice powers is shunned. So that's supposed to represent how Lucifer fell, and then the sister does die. She dies, and then she's brought back to life as like a resurrection.
I have never heard a Christian angle on Frozen, but knowing how popular Frozen is, I now understand why there would be a Christian angle on it. Yeah. I said something similar about Spider-Man when that first movie came out with Tobey Maguire, that Christians were like, that's successful. I want to grab onto that.
Okay, so I'm back, and I think the movie I was talking about is called Beautiful Green. And I watched it a while back, but basically it was like technology, and actually it might be actually probably not necessarily to my question, but I guess maybe more so Ghost in the Shell. Like I think Ghost in the Shell is cool. I guess I don't really see any sort of Christ parallels to it, but more so in the sense of like she is looking for her higher self, and is basically trying to interface with something that seems almost like dangerous or malignant, but in actuality is something that is allowing her to evolve into basically.
Are you talking about Ghost in the Shell, the live action movie, or the anime movies?
Yeah, burn It with Fire. No, I mean the anime. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the anime film from '99, I believe. It was like right before The Matrix.
And the anime film preceded the anime TV show. Is that correct?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, I'm just making sure I've got my ghosts and shells all straight.
I know there's a lot of different spin-offs and such. Definitely.
Would you say so? I've watched a few episodes of Ghost in the Shell. Would you say that there was a sort of spiritual component to some of the musings presented there, or are you talking about something different?
Well, the show, again, like with the show, unfortunately, I haven't really. I watched it years and years ago, but I don't remember anything about it. But I'm mostly referring to the movie from '99, and yeah, like basically she's questioning, what is like how our memories, I guess, make us, and more so like our roles here, like on in the world, and how we push past boundaries, and go towards things like that. But it's I'm trying to explain it in a way, but I'm guessing most of you guys have not seen it, or
I have not, other than a couple anime episodes, which is sort of beside your point there.
Right.
Yeah, I haven't watched Ghost in the Shell since I was like 13, and that was an indescribable amount of years ago.
I feel you, man. Yeah, I would say, if you have nothing else to do, sometime, I would say check it out, see what you think. But anyways, I actually have to go. My stomach is like doing backflips right now. I don't know why. I'm starting to get a headache, and I'm just like getting really tired. But have a good rest of the day, guys.
Well, take a break. Hope you feel better.
Likewise.
Yeah, thanks for chatting. I appreciate
Feel better.
it. Thanks.
I was actually going to say, Broclen, we've been at this one for a little bit. How long do you usually keep these Q&As on a Wednesday going?
Well, we are officially. I usually go for 2 hours, and we're 15 minutes past that. So I was going to ask if we wanted to go around. I know Union. I don't know if you've had a chance to talk much at all, but I was going to wrap it up with our final thoughts, unless someone had a last movie or two they wanted to throw out.
Oh, okay. May I? Yeah. Hi,
Shoot your
everyone.
shot. Now's the chance.
Awesome. Yeah, I was having a hard time trying to get that in. I thought I might have. I was going to try and take a crack at his question. Just a thing. I remember watching, like, I think it was Kung Fu Panda. One of those movies, of all things. Was seeing it in the theater, and was with a friend who at the time said, "You ever noticed how so many movies have a savior role in them?" And I think that's pretty general and broad. I mean, any type of superhero or any type of protagonist is.
Well, I don't know about. It's been a while since I watched Kung Fu Panda, but I was thinking that earlier, that there's sort of a heroic archetype of self-sacrifice that I know we see in the MCU. That being willing to take it for the team, whether it's Tony Stark or some other characters as well. So, yeah, I wonder if that's sort of become an appendage on the hero's journey, where we expect some level of self-sacrifice, because that's sort of part of the zeitgeist.
Yeah, there's our if it's not self-sacrifice, it's somebody. It's somebody chosen to save. Be the chosen one. There's a prophecy or some. There's so many of that type. Applies to a lot of movies, I think.
I just wanted to bring up that
I think just in general, audiences do. Like it's a good setup. It's a good way to ask why the plot occurs from the beginning if you just have someone who is destined to fulfill a role, right? I think it's a useful story element, and it has a long history. But like, if you're producing a movie where you want your main character to be inherently special within the world and kind of explain why a single figure who is usually comes from some sort of normal or humble background is going to be so critical to the world history, then having some sort of chosen role is just a great shorthand to bring that in, I think.
Legend of Zelda seems to take advantage of that, where it's great shorthand in a movie that in a video game that the character doesn't speak, so they get more mileage by using that archetype.
If I might add, so to take it a little bit further, some of my personal thoughts are I think people have always looked for a hero, a savior. I think they look for them in politics and leaders, and I personally thought that maybe it's so popular because it's just maybe something innate in us. People are looking for a savior if they realize it or not.
I mean, a friend who's going to take hits for you is like a real friend, and I don't think you need to have a theological position to feel that way.
I think we also tend to want to see ourselves in those sorts of figures as well. Like, there's a reason that they are, like, it's either a protagonist or a mentor. It's who do you want to be or who do you want to have there for you, right? Who's usually the savior figure. Like Gandalf is a savior figure in Lord of the Rings, and he fills a mentor role. Whereas, like, for example, Luke Skywalker fulfills a sort of like protagonist with destiny role, even if it's not necessarily spelled out in the same way. And we view those characters differently. We view Gandalf through the eyes of Frodo and the other hobbits as someone to look up to, whereas we view Luke Skywalker generally like as someone on our level because he's a point of view character throughout the story.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. We are going to start wrapping it up now, and I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to just give us your brief final thought, anything you want to share. Also, if you have any projects that you want to plug, now's the time to do that. But we are going to be closing up shop here and playing our outro music. Equivalent, you haven't had an opportunity to say too much. Do you want to say anything? Do you have anything to plug? Or
I don't have anything to plug, but I think this was lovely. Like I said before, I have never even been privy to. No one's ever brought this up before. That's why I saw the title and I was like, "Oh, this sounds great." I don't get the chance to talk about this normally, or to even get to just listen to other people go through it. I learned a lot, I would say, and when I say that, I mean a lot of things that you wouldn't think would have religious connotation. I found out that they did today. So thank you so much for, letting me be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming by. Appreciate it. Nun Tribe, you want to share any final thoughts?
Yeah, quick one, which is I wish that anytime there's an angel in a movie, it was portrayed biblically. So again, angels in the outfield, if we can get those accurate depictions,
biblically
of
accurate angels in the outfield.
Yeah, that would be really a plus up on that type of movie.
That's a horror movie. Let's be not afraid.
And just saying, just want to throw that out there. So that's my final thought for today. Thanks, everyone.
That's good. I like that. Castor Troy, thank you for being with us for not one but two recordings in a single week. Do you want to say any final thoughts here or share anything?
Well, first, foremost, thanks for having me. Felt good to be a part of this community for two sessions, 2 days. Just in terms of like religion and cinema and all of that, I think it's just very interesting I don't want people to separate their faith when they're watching movies so they can take more in, but I do want us all to extend grace when watching things that might not be depicting religion in the way that you think best fits what your version of it is, because this is how we get examples of just people that are trying to create stories based off of these ideals and their beliefs and weave them in and make something greater than their individual parts. So I do think a lot of these movies that we're referencing, and I love that I was able to share the RoboCop example and see the reactions that I saw, because those things are out there and you have to just being able to see them through a slightly different lens. It's a lot of fun, and it's something I look out for. Even as a person that I don't identify as a fully religious person, I still am fascinated, intrigued, and very interested in religion and what that means to people, and seeing how people react to those things. So as long as I can still do that through movies, I'm going to be doing it. And thanks for letting me talk about that stuff here.
Thanks for bringing your knowledge and wisdom, because as you well know, I'm pretty ignorant on a lot of this stuff. Jacob, I want to thank you for again being my intrepid co-host. Do you want to say anything on your way out the door here?
Movies are fun, and I've learned that I need to watch more of them because I have not watched like half of the ones discussed here today.
Yes, there will always be more movies for us to take in. Thanks for bringing up the Indiana Jones angle. I think sometimes I've seen it so many times I forget sort of about that obvious religious significance.
You almost forget that it's all religious stuff through all 4 movies.
It was right in front of me the whole time. All right. Well, this has been the Dank Christian Memes podcast. Our music is provided by Olive Tiger. Our recording sessions happen Sundays at 3 p.m. and Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, that is. Dank Christian Memes is a place for all kinds of Christians and all kinds of non-Christians to enjoy some silly memes together. If you'd like to connect with the community further, you can check out our Discord link in the comment section. Thank you for listening, and until next time, may the memes bless you and keep you.